Shalom and welcome to Temple Talk. This is Yitzhak Reuven speaking to you from south of Jerusalem here in the holy, beautiful land of Israel. Today is the 5th day of the month of Mar Cheshvan, 5785. It's November 5th, 2024. This coming Shabbat we read Parsha Lech Lecha, which begins in the book of Genesis, chapter 12, verse 1. It concludes chapter 17, verse 27. It's an exciting day in America, I know that, because there's elections and very gorali, very fateful elections for the entire world, we are told, and so it seems. And I'm sure everybody has their favorite candidates. I've got mine. And if you've been reading the news, you'll know that in Israel, just opinion polls they take, Trump is much more popular than Harris, mainly because of Trump's very favorable policies toward Israel during his tenure as president, and also his very harsh treatment of Iran, which to a great extent crippled Iran's ability to foment violence against Israel, something which the Biden administration completely overturned, allowing tens of billions of dollars into Iran, allowing Iran to fund their proxies all around the Middle East surrounding Israel, which eventually, with other factors, of course, led to last year's massacre in southern Israel and the resulting war, which continues to this day. In fact, Iran has threatened to directly attack Israel tonight. They say they want to, I guess, cloud the news of the U.S. elections with news of an attack on Israel. Whether they will attack tonight or not, I don't know. We are certainly expecting an attack from Iran. Whether Israel will preempt that attack or not, we don't know. But this is basically, these are the reasons why Trump is very popular here in Israel. And in fact, about 500,000 Israelis have dual Israeli-American citizenship and have the right to vote. And many of them will be voting. And will that have an impact? I don't know. It's supposed to be a very close election. It's hard to believe anything anymore. What you read, what you see, what you hear. But we'll just hope for the best, and whoever ends up as the new president, we will hope for the best, and we know that God has a plan, and his plan leaves out, nothing is addressed in God's plan. In fact, speaking of God's plan, God had a plan for a man named Avram. A man named Avram, who we just heard his name at the very end of last week's Parsha, Noach, right? We hear a whole line of genealogy, and it ends with Avram and his wife Sarai and his nephew Lot. And that's all we know about this Avram, but all of a sudden, out of nowhere, we begin this week's Parsha. And I might as well read the first few verses in Hebrew than in English. I'm reading from chapter 12, verse 1 in the book of Genesis. Vayomer Hashem el Avram, Lech Lecha me'aretzecha, me'moladtecha, u'mibeit avicha, el haaretz asher are'eka, ve'esecha legoy gadol, ve'avarechecha, ve'agarla shimcha, v'haye bracha, ve'avarecha mevarechecha, u'makalalecha aor. ונברכו בך כל משפחות האדמה. וילך אברהם כאשר דיבר אליו השם, וילך איתו לוט ואברהם בן 5 שנים ו70 שנה בצאתו מחרן. ויקח אברהם את שרי אשתו, ואת לוט בן אחיו, ואת כל רכושם אשר רכשו, ואת הנפש אשר עשו בחרן. ויצאו ללכת ארצה כנען, ויבואו ארצה כנען. Hashem said to Avram, "Go for yourself from your land, from your relatives, and from your father's house to the land that I will show you, and I will make of you a great nation. I will bless you and make your name great, and you shall be a blessing. I will bless those who will bless you, and him who curses you I will curse, and all the families of the earth shall bless themselves by you. So Avram went as HaShem had spoken to him, and Lot went with him. Avram was 75 years old when he left Haran. Avram took his wife Sarai and Lot his brother's son, and all their wealth that they had amassed, and the souls they had made in Haran, and they left to go to the land of Canaan. And they came to the land of Canaan. Okay, so Avram, who's at this point still known as Avram, we haven't heard anything about. We don't know anything about him. Why did God choose Avram for this mission? For this mission in history? We don't know. The Torah doesn't tell us anything. We will discover as we continue to read that Avram is quite an extraordinary person. But at this point, we know nothing about him. Now, our sages have filled in a lot of backstory. Midrashic backstories. That means they fill in, based on clues and hints in the Torah. They try to discover why Hashem chose Avram. But at this point, as far as the Torah is concerned, it's of no concern. Now you have this man Avram, who's living in Haran with his father and his family, and he's doing quite well, it seems. And God calls out to him, first time. God has called out to Avram. It's not a common occurrence. God doesn't just call out to anybody. And he says, Lech Lecha. Okay, Lech Lecha is a very interesting expression. It happens twice in Avram's lifetime that Hashem says to him, Lech Lecha. This is the first time. The second time is when he says, Lech Lecha. And that is when he is instructing Avram, his final test of his life, to take his son Yitzchak and offer him up as an offering on Har Moriah. So this expression, which occurs twice in Avram's life, is a very fascinating expression. The word lech simply means go. And lech lecha could be just like a more emphatic expression, go, get out of there. It also could also mean, as it is translated here, go for yourself, for your sake, or go into yourself, dive deep into your soul. So I think that this expression, Lech Lecha, has a physical and also a very spiritual meaning to it. It means, yes, go, leave your father's house, leave your country, your homeland, all your family, and go physically, but also you're going on a journey of your soul. You're going deep into who you are. You're going to discover who you are. So maybe that's why we know nothing about Avram. Maybe that's why the Torah tells us nothing about Avram up to this point, because we're in a journey of discovery. And it's such an amazing expression, Lech Lecha. It's something that we should all take to heart and challenge ourselves with in our own lives. There's so many times when we need to just Lech Lecha. We just need to get up and get out of where we're at and change the scenery. And if it means, really pulling up, what's the expression? I forget the expression now. Pulling up and leaving family even, if necessary, to go on a journey to discover who you really are and what your purpose is and what you're meant to do in life, and be in touch with Hashem. It's a very, very, very important challenge. This is a challenge. And Avram, who, as we're going to see, was a man who was very curious, a man who had principles, a man who was not afraid to speak his mind, even to Hashem, a man who on occasions had great doubts and fears. At this point, he doesn't question a thing. He just picks up and goes. He took his wife, he took his nephew, Lot, who he was the guardian of, and all their possessions, and apparently it seems that they did well in Haran. Another thing, it's difficult to leave when you're doing well where you are. And left his family. That's tough. He left his father. He'll probably never see his father again. It's very, very difficult. But he did it without question. So when God called to Avram he was there. He was all present and accounted for. He was right there, and he went into the land. And the promises that God makes to Avram, beginning with the one we just read, and I will make of you a great nation. I will bless you and make your name great, and you shall be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and him who curses you I will curse, and all the families of the earth shall bless themselves by you. Avram wasn't asking for that. He wasn't asking for anything. So this comes out of nowhere. So Avram's got to be like, what in the world, what's going on? God calls to me, okay. When I hear this call, I'm on board. I'm a man of faith. But God just said, go. I'm already going. And God made this big promise. Now Avram at this point is childless. And it seems like his wife Sarai cannot bear children. So not only is this a huge, imagine this, being told that you are going to be basically the father of a great nation and a blessing for the world. And not only is that in itself, a whopper of a promise, but you don't even have any children, and it seems like you're not going to have children. So basically what we learn from this is the incredible faith, emunah, that Avram had in HaShem. And again, where's it coming from? So I will share with you now very quickly the backstory that our sages have shared with us, and that is that Avram, as a child, I'm sure you've heard this, as a child living in the city of Ur, which was part of the Babylonian Empire, the early Babylonian, not empire, but the Babylonian city, which was very powerful, under the rule of Nimrod. His father, Terach, was an idol salesman. He had a store, and his store was filled with idols, and people would come in and build an idol and buy an idol that they would worship. And one day, Terach had to go out for something, and he told Avram, his son, you take charge of the store, and I'll be back soon. So his father left, and Avram took a stick and smashed all the idols except one. And when his father came back, he said, oh, what happened? Who did this? And Avram pointed to the one idol that was standing, and he said, he did it. And Terach said, don't be ridiculous. That's just a piece of clay. Can't do that. And Avram said, yeah, right. Why do you sell these? Why do you worship these? So word got out, and the king of Ur, Nimrod, took Avram and threw him into a furnace to kill him for this act of heresy. And Avram walked out of the furnace unscathed. But Nimrod wasn't done with him, so Terach took Avram and the rest of the family and fled to Haran, which is where this story picks up. Now, that's the beginning of the backstory. The rest of the backstory is that Avram, as we could see from the childhood, was a very observant, very clever, very curious person, and he did not accept the established practices and norms, and he questioned them. And so he was on a journey. Even before we get to Lech Lecha, he was on a journey to find out what's going on. He said he saw that he would travel around, and he saw that every city, every town had its own god, which struck him as interesting. But then he saw that there's something more powerful than each of those gods, and he saw that there was something. Some people worshipped the stars, but he saw that something makes the stars move. Some people worship the sun, but what makes the sun move? So finally, he, on his own, intellectually, to conclude the story of the backstory, he came to the understanding that there was but one God who was in control and charge of everything. And so that, so when God called upon him, he was ready. He understood who was addressing him, and he was ready to pick up everything and leave to this unknown land where God was making great promises. So that's the backstory as the rabbis of old saw it. And yes, it makes a lot of sense. But again, the Torah itself doesn't concern itself with that backstory. It simply introduces Avram out of nowhere and then says God called him and said, Lech Lecha. So I think that's also important, because who are we? If God calls to us today and says, Lech Lecha, we're going to be like, wow, out of nowhere. Why me? We'll be taken by surprise. And hopefully, if it's really God calling us, we will be prepared to divest ourselves of all that baggage that holds us back and follow HaShem. But at that point, everything that led up to that is really not of importance to us. Only in retrospect might we look back and say, oh, you know what? I kind of understand now. This was the path that my life was leading me on ever since I was a kid. Things happen in life and you end up somewhere and it's all kind of by coincidence. And then if you look back, you say, oh, you know what? It all makes sense. This is really where I was heading all along. So I think that's maybe why we are sort of left in the dark by the Torah as to Avraham's backstory. Anyway, moving right along. Avraham, now, he gets to the land, he builds an altar, he seems to build a few altars, and then there's a famine and he needs to go down to Egypt, and he's afraid when he gets near Egypt that everybody's going to fall in love with his wife Sarai, but she's so beautiful, so he asks her to tell him that he's his sister. She's his sister so that he won't be killed, so that they can take her. And of course, what happens is that Pharaoh takes her. HaShem causes Pharaoh to have all sorts of afflictions, and Pharaoh realizes what's going on, so he castigates Avram and sends him away, but not before Avram had been given a lot of livestock as a price for Sarai. And so they go back, and then of course we get into the situation where Avram has so many great flocks, as does Lot, and they can't share the same land. The land won't support them both, so he gives Lot the choice of where he wants to go. Lot decides to go to Sodom, which is in the Dead Sea area today, but at that time it was a green, lush area, so it made sense that he would go there. Soon after that, there's this whole story of sort of a regional war, almost a world war, with all these kings fighting other kings. There's a whole history there, and Lot gets kidnapped and is brought up to Damascus, and so Avram is forcibly lassoed into this war. He gathers together 318 of his people, and he forms a sort of a commando unit and goes all the way up to Damascus, rescues Lot and other people, and also property that was stolen, and brings them back. And then of course he has that famous, fabulous, mysterious meeting with Melchizedek, the king of Salem, and of course Melchizedek he's the king of Shalem. He's also a Kohen of God on high, and a very, very fascinating and beautiful passage, and mysterious, because we don't know, again, we're not told anything about Melchizedek before this, and we're not told about Melchizedek after this. And this is very beautiful. I want to just read it. And I'm just looking for it as I'm speaking. Oh, here it is. Okay, it's in chapter 14, verse 17. The king of Sodom went out to meet Avram after his return from defeating Chedorlaomer and the kings that were with him to the valley of Shaveh, which is the king's valley. But Melchizedek, king of Shalem, brought out bread and wine. He was a priest, a Kohen of God, the Most High. He blessed him, saying, Blessed is Avram of God, the Most High, maker of heaven and earth. And blessed be God, the Most High, who has delivered your foes into your hand. And he gave him a tenth of everything. So, very fascinating, because he's referred to in Hebrew as a Kohen. Now, Kohen is a word otherwise only used for Aaron, the brother of Moshe, and his sons, the Kohanim, to this day. Any priest of any idolatrous nation is in Hebrew called a Komer. So obviously Melchizedek is the real thing. He's a priest of God, a Kohen of God. And in fact, I posted this, if you'd like to check that out on Facebook. Melchizedek, according to Jewish tradition, I know there's all sorts of traditions about Melchizedek, because he's such a fascinating and righteous figure. And again, his name Melchizedek means king of justice, or just king. And Shalem, of course, is just another name for Yerushalayim, Jerusalem. So he was a Kohen in Jerusalem, right? It's a pretty clear indication that he was the guy. And the fact that he brought him bread and wine, our sages said that precedes the showbread and the wine libation that were offerings in the temple, in the holy temple, and the fact that Avram gave him a tithe, a maaser, again a temple truma, a temple offering. So this was the real thing. And in fact, again, our sages say that he was none other than Shem, the son of Noah. Of course, this was many, many generations later, so he would have been very, very old at the time. And that he was intended originally by HaShem to be the first of the Kohanim, and that his sons would follow in his footsteps. But, get this, according to our sages, because Melchizedek blessed Avram before he blessed HaShem, and Avram said, wait a minute, shouldn't the master be blessed before the servant? And Hashem said, wow, you know what? Avram's children deserve this. So Avram, who himself was a descendant of Shem, his descendants, who would be the children of Aaron, would become the Kohanim. So that is a midrashic understanding. But again, there's so much fascinating, and part of the fascination is because he's such an amazing character. And again, the Torah does not tell us anything more about him than what we just read. Okay, moving right along. Again, Hashem comes to Avram in a vision, and he says, don't worry, don't be afraid. You're going to have a child one day. And again, this goes, a few times. And again, we have the Brit Ben Abatarim, the covenant between the pieces. And, Avraham is like, what are you talking about, God? The beautiful thing about Avraham, and I talked about this a bit last week, and I wrote about it last week, that as opposed to Noah, who, as I pointed out last week, never opened his mouth. He said one thing, and that was he cursed his son. He cursed his grandson. Avraham speaks to everybody. He is not shy, and he is willing and always wants to speak his mind, whether it's to a fellow man, woman, whether it's, it doesn't matter. You could list all the people he talks to. It's probably 20 different people by name that you could list that he talks to. It's really incredible. And of course, he also talks to angels, and he also talks to Hashem. And when he talks to Hashem, he just pours out his heart. He's not shy, he's not bashful, and he challenges Hashem, and he keeps saying, you keep promising me things. I mean, Hashem was promising him the world. You're going to be the father of this nation. Now, this is a promise that can't possibly come true, be fulfilled in Avram's day, because you don't become from an individual to a nation in one generation. He knows that. Beyond that, he doesn't even have a son yet, and his wife hasn't been able to give birth. So, Hashem is really pushing it, and this is part of the test. Hashem was always testing Avram, and Avram was always testing Hashem, to tell you the truth. When's it going to happen? How's it going to happen? Take my servant Eliezer. He's a good guy. I have no kids. Just bless me through Eliezer. And Hashem says, no, not through Eliezer. You're gonna have a son. And then, his wife Sarai says, I'm not able to have a child. Take Hagar, my maidservant, and have a child through her. Avram does, and Hashem says, no, it's not him. I promised you, and I'm telling you, your child's going to come through Sarai. And so you have two promises going on here, and one is contingent upon the other. The one promise, this grandiose promise of you will become a great nation, and the world will be blessed through you, and those who bless you will be blessed, and those who curse you will be cursed. And of course, this is a blessing and a promise that is so viable and alive today, and everybody knows it. And everybody knows that the nations and the people who stick with Israel and bless Israel will be blessed, and those who go against Israel will be cursed. A lot of people, a lot of leaders, and a lot of people have not learned that yet, but everybody knows it. So you have that grandiose promise, and then another promise that you're going to have a child, which, not everybody is capable of having children, but still, it seems like the minimal promise, like it's not unheard of that people have children. And even that, time's passing. Avram enters into the land of Canaan at the age of 75. At the end of this parsha, he's 99. And other than Ishmael, which Hashem says is not going to be the person who is going to inherit your promise, my promise to you, and so, when's it going to happen? He's old, and his wife is old. And, come on. God, what are you telling me? So God was really, really, really pushing it to the limits. And Avraham he never lost his faith in Hashem's promise, but he did, ask, when's it going to happen, and how's it going to happen? And, of course, toward the end of this week's parasha is when God says to Avram, your name, you will have children. This is when he tells that he will circumcise all the men in his household, and that God is changing his name from Avram to Avraham, because he will be the father of a great nation, of many nations, a multitude of nations. And then he says, and your wife Sarai will no longer be called Sarai; she will be called Sarah. Now the name Avram to Avram, he added the letter Hey. Sarai's name was spelled Shin Resh Yud. Now it's Sarah, it's Shin Resh Hey. So that Yud, which has a numerical value of 10, seems to have been divided into two Heys, because each Hey has a numerical value of 5. The Yud and a Hey both, by the way, are part of Hashem's name. So Hashem is not just changing their names, not just making cosmetic name change here. He is changing a spiritual reality of both Avram and Sarah, which will enable them to have a child. So until now, yes, they were not able to have children, but God at this point, by changing their names, by manipulating the letters of their names, letters that have cosmic meaning and power, he is making it possible so that they will be able to have a child. That is how the entire family gets circumcised, including Ishmael, at the age of 13, I believe. And that's how the parsha ends. In the time we have left, I'd like to simply discuss a few more things. Today is the 5th day of the month of Mar Cheshvan, and tomorrow will be tomorrow meaning Wednesday evening, Thursday will be the 6th, and the 6th day of Mar Cheshvan is the anniversary. I believe it's the 800 and something, I have to look it up, anniversary of the ascent of Rambam, Moshe Maimonides, Moshe ben Maimon, also known as Maimonides, the great 12th century sage, or perhaps one of the greatest, maybe the greatest sage of all time. in Jewish history. We left his land where he was living in Morocco at the time, sailed to the land of Israel, and entered the land of Israel in the northern port of Akko, also known as Acre. And this was during the time of the Crusades, and made his way down to Jerusalem, where on the 6th of Mar Cheshvan, he writes, and he wrote in a letter, on the 6th of Mar Cheshvan, he ascended the Temple Mount where he prayed. And this is very, very significant, especially for our contemporary Temple Mount ascenders, because this was a historic precedent of a sage, and one of the greatest, if not the greatest sage of our history. They say from Moshe to Moshe, there was none like Moshe. From Moshe, the original Moshe, to Moshe Maimonides, there was none as great as either of them. And of course, Moshe Maimonides, Moshe ben Maimon, Rambam, as we affectionately call him, Rambam, was the only sage who wrote in depth about all the laws of the Mikdash, of the Holy Temple. Others didn't, because it wasn't relevant to how people live their lives. So they felt that they couldn't dedicate their time to that. But he did. And he also wrote about the laws, the halacha, the laws of how one does go up to the Temple Mount, how one honors and shows respect to HaShem at the Temple Mount. And so the fact that he recorded and wrote about his time on the Temple Mount and said that it would become, he decreed that for his children and his children's children to the end of time, it should be a holiday, a festive day, to celebrate the day that he went up to the Temple Mount to pray. An amazing thing, and we're going to be posting a lot about it in the upcoming days. And again, it's a huge precedent, because many contemporary rabbis, claim that they state that you're not allowed to go up to the Temple Mount until the temple's built because we're impure, and there are many, and increasingly many more rabbis who say that's not accurate, because there certainly are places where we can go according to halakha, according to Jewish law, and nobody really argues that. The only argument that really those who are against it, the rabbis who are against it, end up with is that it's going to upset the Arabs, and it's going to cause violence. Okay. What doesn't upset the Arabs and cause violence? What doesn't, the fact that we're in Israel upsets them and causes violence. But as you know, more and more Jews are going up to the Temple Mount, where now we are able to pray, and it's a wonderful thing. And again, so Rambam, during the days, and there were many years, decades even, when a handful of Jews might go up to the Temple Mount in a week, and they weren't allowed to do a thing. They weren't allowed to talk. And they weren't allowed to pray even silently. And so the story of Rambam going up to the Temple Mount was always a tremendous inspiration, and gave a lot of people the courage and the strength to continue to go up and to work to make change on the Temple Mount. And it's happening. So it's a very important day. The other thing I wanted to mention before the end of the show is that the 7th of Mar Cheshvan is the day that we begin praying for rain here in the land of Israel. It's 2 weeks exactly following the last day of the pilgrimage festivals, and giving all the pilgrims in ancient times enough time to get home safely. So this coming Thursday, Friday, I believe, we begin praying for rain. I hear the music. I gotta go. Thanks for being with me. Temple Talk.